Hello, and thank you so much for watching my presentation. My name is Jennifer Lewis. I'm a biology student here at Central, and I'm excited to talk about my research using passive acoustic monitoring to study avian distribution patterns in a post-fire landscape. Before I start, I'd first like to acknowledge my faculty mentor, Dr. Allison Scoville, as well as Dr. Taza Shamming, Ashley Sacco, and Isaac Larson for supporting this project. I would also like to acknowledge Kittitas Audubon Society, who awarded me a scholarship for this school year. So as many of us know, fire is an important part of a healthy ecosystem, especially for a lot of wildlife species. As a fire moves through a forest, it clears out underbrush and old wood, which returns nutrients to the soil and allows new plants like grass and wildflowers to grow. This provides food and habitat for species such as mule deer. As you can see in this example, fire also often leaves behind dead trees, which provides habitat for species like the black-backed woodpecker, which is a conservation priority species in the state of Washington. However, despite the benefits of fire, humans have been taking actions to suppress it throughout the last century. This has led to a buildup of dead wood and other fuel, which, combined with hotter and drier conditions due to climate change, is causing fire patterns to change, especially in the western US. This figure is from a study that looked at the occurrence of large fires, which they defined as over 400 hectares or about 1,000 acres. You can see that the total number of these fires has been increasing in both forest and grass and shrubland habitats since the 1970s. This figure also shows that the total area burned by these large fires has also been increasing in both forest and grass and shrubland habitats during that time period. So it seems like we've been getting a bit too much of a good thing. This has had some pretty obvious negative effects on humans. Entire communities have been destroyed by some of these large fires, and even in areas that don't get destroyed, the increase in smoke can cause hazardous air quality concerns. We're also starting to learn that these large fires could be having a negative effect on wildlife too. This map is from a study that tracked greater white-fronted geese on their fall migration. The map on the left is from 2019. There weren't a lot of fires that year. You can see a couple of smaller areas of smoke down here in the south. And you can also see that with that, the migration paths of the geese were pretty straightforward. However, the next year in 2020, there was a much more active fire season. You can see that there's a ton of smoke in this pink area, and with that, the migration pathways of the geese are all over the place, presumably because they're trying to avoid that wildfire smoke. Here in Washington, we've had quite a few fires, both large and small, over the past 20 years. So in order to learn more about how that has impacted wildlife in this state, we focused on this area in the Central Cascades. This is the site of the Schneider Springs fire, which burned over 113,000 acres in 2021. So one of those large fires that the previous study I mentioned was investigating. Within this area, I wanted to learn about how birds use the landscape after a fire. How do they respond? To answer this question, we chose 12 sites in 2 locations within the fire footprint: Timberwolf Mountain here in the north and Cache Prairie down in the south. We classified each of those sites as severely, moderately, or unburned. In September 2022, about a year after the Schneider Springs fire burned, we deployed an autonomous recording unit, or ARU, at each site. And these recorded all of the sounds up to 8 kilohertz throughout the majority of the day. Just as a little bit of a reference, human hearing goes up to about 20 kilohertz. And so once we had all of those recordings, we used the software Raven Pro to manually pick out all of the bird calls and Then we recorded the presence or absence of each bird species for every hour. And the goal here was to determine if there was a difference in the number of species and types of birds detected in the different burn types. And so we found, first of all, that there was a significant difference in the number of species, also known as species richness, across some of the burn types. This box plot shows the number of species detected per site each day in the 3 different burn types. And you can see that there were significantly more species detected in the unburned forest than in the severely burned. Of the species we detected, some of them were also more likely to be detected in some of the burn types. These box plots show the number of hours per site each day that these species were present in each burn type. You can see that for a lot of the species, they were more likely to be detected in unburned than severely burned forest. However, both stellars and Canada jays were more likely to be detected in both unburned and moderately burned. And then you have the hairy woodpecker, which was opposite all of the other species, and they were more likely to be detected in severely burned forest. It's pretty well known that woodpeckers like dead trees, and there are likely to be more dead trees in severely burned forest than the other burn types, so this makes sense based on what we know about them. Another interesting species to pay attention to here is the Clark's nutcracker. This bird is the primary seed disperser of the whitebark pine, which was recently listed as threatened under the U.S. Endangered Species Act. The way that the nutcracker disperses the seeds is they make little caches of seeds to save for the winter, and inevitably they don't eat them all. So some of the ones that they don't eat will sprout and grow into more trees. The time of year we made these recordings in September is the main time of year that they're starting to cache all of these seeds. And so even though the nutcrackers were more likely to be detected in unburned forest, they were still present in all 3 of the burn types. This shows that there's potential for them to be caching these seeds in areas with different burn severities, and that is something that definitely warrants further research as we work to understand this tree species that is declining during a time when these large fires are becoming more frequent. So regarding my original question of how birds respond after a fire, it kind of depends. Fire creates this mosaic of different burn severities throughout a forest. Some birds use the entire landscape, while others might have a preference for unburned or severely burned areas. As fires become larger and more frequent, the composition of that fire mosaic and the habitats available for birds to use will also be changing. Ultimately, we really just need more research to better understand how both individual species and the greater avian community will respond to changing fire regimes in the Pacific Northwest and the entire US. And with that, thank you very much for watching my presentation.